Welcome back, you amazing wire student person. We are hitting tutorial number 10 with this video. This means that you have a solid understanding of how wire works by now. This also means it's time to incorporate Arena and Avenue into your patching. This tutorial is here to teach you how you can make Arena and Avenue work with wire. Note that I am using Arena and I will be mentioning Arena throughout the video, but everything I do here works with Avenue as well. This tutorial is all about making your wire patches interactive in Arena. For this, we need in and out nodes, or I/O nodes if you're being particularly nerdy about it. All the nodes you see here are the I/O nodes as making of this video. If you're watching this in the future, there might be already some new I/O nodes. The ones on the left should look familiar to you, and you have seen me use them already. The ones on the right allow for the use of MIDI, OSC, FFT, and slices in wire. These nodes will have their own tutorial in the near future, but for now just know that they exist as we focus on the I/O nodes on the left. The fact that the node has the word in its name means that it will show up in the Arena interface once it's been loaded as a source or an effect. They will also be named float in, color in, and bool in, so make sure to change the names to something more fitting. The texture in node is the only exception to this. This node will not show up in the UI. Let's have a look at these I/O nodes. The float in node will allow the user to input a floating point value for the parameter. The value has to be between its minimum and maximum value set in the inspector. Note that you can also disable min and max values if needed. Everything we have just discussed also applies to the integer in node, but then with whole numbers. The Boolean in node will give the user a Boolean to toggle between. And that's it, nothing really to write home about. And the same can be said for the trigger in node, which will show up as a button in the Arena interface. Upon being triggered, it sends as a trigger which you can use to, trigger other nodes. The color in node gives the user control over the color. In the Arena interface, the color picker will show up, where you can use HSB and RGB sliders or exit your palette presets. The string in allows the user to write something that can be processed in the patch. And lastly, the choice in node gives you a drop-down menu. No need to explain this one further as we have already did this in the previous tutorial. Before we move on to making some patches, we need to talk about categories. When you save your patch and want to use it in Arena, it needs to be set to a category. You can find the category of the patch by clicking on a blank space on the canvas, navigating to the inspector and selecting the right category from the drop-down menu. And that's all you need to know about the basic I/O nodes and categories. In the next few clips, I'll talk you through a mixer, a source, and an effect that I've made, and explain how the I/O nodes interact with that patch. All right, we'll start with this source that I've made. For this patch, I wanted to create a source that, like a shape that is not possible to make in Arena. So we start out here in the top. I'll disable the preview monitor over here. Stretch it up a little bit. We start out with a cross, some spokes, a rectangle, and a rhombus, and they are all put into the union node. And the union node combines the shapes as we've learned in the shapes tutorial, and it's at stairs mode. So this gives the stepping, heavy, like blocky edges on the shape, and then I create an edge out of that as well. This gets transformed. I'll show you how that works in a bit. Goes to a shape render. The shape render turns the shape into a texture. So shape out into the texture, into the shape render, texture out. Then we multiply it with a gradient. So in a previous tutorial about logic, I said that logic nodes can be used for texture operations. The same is true for math. You don't really need to know how this works. Just know that when you send in a completely white texture and apply a colored texture, multiply it with a color texture, it will overlay it. So we have this gradient, and as you can see, it slowly fades out from yellow to red. And a texture out. You need it to have a texture out when creating a source. Now, as far as the I/O goes, I give the user control over the amount of steps. So you can increase or decrease the amount of steps used by the union node. Just create a simple integer in this case, because steps are whole. You don't have a half step. So this is an integer in node that I renamed to steps. It runs from 0 to 8, with this sweet spot, I think, around 2. And I think the steps node would go way higher. Yeah, it goes up to 100, but it just didn't look good. As you are designing your own sources, you have to feel like, what is the sweet spot? Uh, then the step size, that how big are these steps? We have control over that as well. Normally, that has to be a value between 0 and 1, but I find that values above, let's see, 0 0.4, well, anything above 0 0.4 is kind of useless. So what I did is I just take a slider that goes from 0 to 1, and I divide it by 2.5, and that gives me a nice range from 0 to 0, from 0 to 0 0.4, that is usable. I prefer to keep all my parameters where relevant from 0 to 1, as it just looks ugly in the interface. I personally find that looks ugly if you have parameters that go from 0 to 0.34, because that's the sweet spot, or don't have a sweet spot at all. That half of the parameter is useless. Like, I like to keep it as usable as possible, and you can make your patches as user friendly as need to be. Same goes here. The thickness of the edge. Let me preview the whole shape again. So this is the thickness of the edge node. So the edge creates, from this solid thing, it creates an outline. And I want to give the user control over it. Again, the slider, which is a float, goes from 0 to 1. I divide it by 10, so I get a range from 0 to 0.1, because I find that the sweet spot is in between there, even though the thickness can have a value up to 1. But it makes no sense in this case to give it a 1. I give the user control over the scale, which is a simple float again, going from 1 or from 0 to 1, and I multiply it by 2.5. So the maximum value that gets out is 2.5, which I think is sort of the max range that is usable in this case. And the same goes for rotation, which just goes from 0 to 1. And the hub node is here just for cable management. A hub node does nothing. Then I have saved it as a source. I gave it a name. And if we move now to Arena, here it is. We have control. Oh, I didn't show that one. I give the user a color A and a color B control over the gradient node. Right. Now we have our interface here. We have in Arena control over the colors. We can recolor the thing. We can change the step size, thickness. This is all the stuff we get to play with. And from here on out, you can start applying effects. Maybe the radial cloner. And get some cool visuals going. Scale it up here, rotate it, different color scheme, etc. From there, the opportunities are endless. One thing to mention before we wrap this up is that the vertical order of the nodes is relevant. As you can see, the colors are at the top of the patch, followed by step size, thickness, scale, and rotation. These are the same, that's the same orientation in Arena. If I move the colors way down here vertically, and I save my patch, as you can see, the colors are now at the bottom as well. And also, as you can see, you can real-time edit and update your patches. You can always, if a source or an effect is a patch, you can always click here and edit the patch. If wire is open, it will load in the patch. If wire is closed, it will boot wire and load up the patch. So that was it for this source. Let's move on to the effect. All right, the second example. This time we're making an effect. To make an effect, you need to have a texture in node and a texture out node, and make sure that you set your category to effect. Instead of using the test card or the wire logo, I am using just a piece of footage that I drag and drop into here, because I think it's more, well, it's more realistic of what you want to make. So what does this effect do? Well, we create an edge. We edge detect the clip. We automask the black out of it. Then we allow the user to colorize it. So if you want to have a colored outline, then that's possible. This gets transformed by a scale and an offset, also user defined, before getting color offset and all modulated and wiggled around by some square oscillators. I'll touch on that in a bit. And then get mixed back again with the original signal. So the original clip is behind it. Maybe the effect is a bit too much right now. So if we lower the amplitude, maybe lower the strength a little bit, in the case of this clip, we can create a pretty cool outline effect on the clip. As I discussed, we allow the user to set the strength of the edge detection, allow the user to pick a color if they want, scale the outline up and down, move the outline around. So you can move the outline if you want to, but not the clip itself. And then we have this big mess of wires over here. That is quite simple. We have a frequency of the oscillators. Just simply, this goes from 0 to 1. Maybe we should up this a little bit. So 0 to 5 if we want to get real chaotic. Yeah. Just give the user the option to do that. So 0 to 5, which just modulates the frequency of each of these oscillators, turning them up and down. These are square, they only have two values, the plus and the minus variant. Same here, we have an amplitude ranging from 0 to 100. So you can get all wacky or get real subtle. That's even too subtle. Get a little bit subtle with it, and it modulates all the squares. What I did do to the squares is phase offset them with quite arbitrary random values. So not everything is in sync. If all the squares would be in sync with each other, the entire outline would move around and you wouldn't even see the color offset. Then they are packed into a float 2, simply because the color offset wants a float 2, and for each channel. So we require 6 oscillators, and we pack them into 3 float 2 values for the red, green, and blue value. In the future, you will learn about instancing, and we can slim the whole thing down significantly. But for now, this is it. I will remove the original clip. Let's delete that. Connect the texture in. Now, I don't need the resource anymore, so I can remove this as well. Makes the patch a lot smaller. And then I save it. Make sure it is an effect. Yes. Go to Arena. Oh, I already had it applied. Let's reapply it. And now it's on this clip, and I can play with the strength, scale. You know, could beat sync this, the frequency of the shift. Maybe you want a big amplitude, or change the color of it, which will change the effect. Reduce the amplitude. I prefer this smaller amplitude, and give a whole new look to a clip. So without. So that's the little effect we made. And finally, we have a mixer patch. A mixer will show up as a transition mode or as a blend mode. You can use either way. And it requires to have 2 texture in nodes, because you're blending or mixing between 2 textures, and a texture out node. Also, you need a video mixer, and it's smart to have a float that runs from 0 to 1. And just have one parameter. This will be if you're using a transition phase, or you're using the knob, the blend knob. This is the blend knob, basically. I renamed it mix just to make it clear for myself. So what is happening here? We have the wire logo. We have the test card going into a video mixer, into a texture out. And we want to pixelate that. So I have my mix variable, my mix parameter, which does the following. We check, well, let's first start at the bottom. The mix gets multiplied by 64 for the columns and the rows of the pixelate effect. and the top texture goes into the pixelate. So it gets pixelated as it gets mixed. But we don't want to keep the pixelated look. So here we have some logic as we've learned about. The equal node we check is the mix at 1, and we check is the mix at 0. Either of these values we don't want to have the pixelate effect on. So we put an or. So if equal to 1 or equal to 0, we bypass the pixelate. Here we pixelate at 0.9 something, and at 1 we're off. And the same is here, we're off at 0. That's what this bit of logic is doing. Then we have the 1 minus x node here. We haven't covered this one yet. It's rather simple. It takes the number 1 and it subtracts the incoming value from it. So we're sending it a 1 right now. 1 minus 1 is 0. The other way around, 1 minus 0 is 1. So this way we can turn one opacity down while the other one is being turned up. Make sure it is set to mixer, and let's have a look how it looks in Arena. Here we have 2 clips, and now I have let's show the transition controls. We need that one. It's just an easy show. If we use it as a transition effect, we can now set it here. I renamed it to pixelate. Where are you? There. And now when I up this a little bit and transition between 2 clips, we get this pixelation effect. So I just made my own transition effect. It can also be used as a blend mode. I can set it now to pixelate and pixelate it down. So mixers done. And that also wraps up this tutorial. You know now how to make a source, an effect, and a mixer. So you should be pretty good to go by now. But more tutorials will follow. See you soon.